Let me help you with that." At the sexy, intimate sound of a man's voice, Laura stopped shrugging into her coat and turned to glance over her shoulder. Her pulse slammed to a stop. Connor Donovan. When he had entered the hotel's ballroom an hour earlier, she'd immediately noticed him. Even at an event attended by Houston's power elite, the man had commanded attention. Her friend Erin had introduced her to Connor, her older brother, and president of Donovan Worldwide. He had been polite, though courteously distant, as if his attention was focused elsewhere. She had found that his icy demeanor was the perfect complement to his cool, intimidating gray eyes. In spite of herself, she continued to watch him. After only 15 minutes, he and a couple of other men had made their excuses and left the ballroom. Since all were moguls, their absence had been noted. Connor had been the first to return, and she had seen the delicious way that he'd adjusted one of his starched, white cuffs. And now, he was standing only inches behind her. "May I?" he prompted. His voice was friendly, but his implacable tone sent a shudder through her. She realized it wasn't really a request. "I'd appreciate that," she said. When his fingers brushed hers, she felt his touch as if it were a sliver of lightning. Their proximity felt intimate, making her aware of how devastatingly handsome he was. She made a conscious decision not to let him know how much he flustered her. She had grown up around authoritative men, but he possessed a unique aura of command. He continued to hold the jacket until she had settled into it. "Thank you," she said as she turned to face him. Though she was tall and wore cripplingly high stilettos, she had to tip her head back to meet his gaze. He looked at her without blinking, and for a moment, she was the focus of his attention. "It's my pleasure to help a beautiful woman." She told herself not to take him seriously. The man hadn't been named president of Donovan Worldwide at such an early age without learning to consider the impact of his words. Still, his genteel southern manners impressed her. No one could have faulted him for walking past the coat check area, but he hadn't. He turned his hand palm up, indicating she should precede him through the revolving glass door. Outside, a cold rain fell in wind-whipped torrents. Thank goodness the portico was covered, but, of course, there were no vehicles waiting in the taxi lane. A sedan pulled up, and Connor said, "I'll give you a ride." "That won't be necessary." Just then, a valet hurried over. "Taxi, ma'am?" She nodded as she brushed her hair back from her face. The valet went to the curb and blew a whistle to summon the cab. "Are you certain?" Connor asked. The idea of being in the back of a vehicle with him, even for a few minutes, gave her shivers in a way that had nothing to do with the outside temperature. "I promise you, Mr. Donovan, I'll be okay." The cab arrived. Connor waved off the valet. Despite the weather, he opened the door to the taxi and handed her into the vehicle. "I'll see you again soon," he said. The words were laced with promise. His gaze lingered. His eyes no longer seemed as cold, yet they appeared 10 times more dangerous. With a decisive move, he closed the door, then walked away, each stride purposeful. In the scant few minutes they had spent together, she'd felt the vortex of his authority. She knew she could have refused his help, but there had been something mesmerizing, something seductive, about the way he had instinctively taken control of the situation. She gave the driver her destination and tried to shake off Connor's effect.